Hello, everyone. And I didn't put up the overlay. There we go. Now it looks official. That's what official is. Yes, this is a completely spontaneous, unplanned thing. And you're here to join me. All of you. Deco, Darth Mando, Blitz Zero, Ostzan, Brittany Holland. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of preamble for this. I was just sitting here thinking, I'm not quite sleepy yet, and I've got all this backlog of stuff that could probably do with a look-see. And it's been a hot minute or seven since I've taken a look at anything dealing with restorative justice. So, yeah, pay no attention to the title at the top of the template or the overlay, because that obviously has nothing to do with this. This is, do I have a more generic overlay? There we go. Not quite on point with the whole justice thing, but, you know, for the sake of avoiding any further confusion. Yeah, restorative justice, subject I don't think I've looked at in quite a while. And truth be told, I've come across a TEDx dealing with it that is my prime candidate for next Thursday, unless something else really catches my attention. So in preparation for that, I thought I'd take a look at this. And what is this? Well, this is a panel discussion on restorative justice from something called State House Futures 2023. I don't know who they are. I don't know what this is about, but except for the fact that it's restorative justice in some way, shape, or form. And what is restorative justice? Well, it's basically trying to find ways other than prison and or incarceration to punish crimes. And depending on how extreme you take the concept, you might even be a prison abolitionist and or a police abolitionist, to the extent you try to find something that is entirely community-based and sort of therapeutic rather than anything punitive. That's the best I can do without any preparation for this. So there you go. And Corey Suzuki, Robert Pincus, Angelverse, Emperor W.R. Costin. Blitz Zero says, I don't know what restorative justice means. So maybe I'll learn something. Well, think of this in these terms. You might have had the experience in life where you got into a fight with somebody as a child, right? And there might have been an adult there, say a recess teacher or someone else, and they pull you apart from your fight and they try to settle it. And then they say, you know, now apologize, shake hands, and part friends, something like that. That's effectively restorative justice at its most simplistic form. It's trying to find a way to settle disagreements and or injury without going beyond and, you know, trying to find some way to balance the scales karmically, socially, or otherwise. The problem is, at least in the extreme degrees of where they're trying to replace prisons or get rid of police, the question comes up, well, what justice is served when it comes to someone who has been injured? If I've been stolen from, if I've been assaulted, if someone I love has someone in some way, shape, or form been harmed, if someone has done something so egregious, how do you settle that in society without isolating that person away from the rest of society to try to make sure they either won't do it again or at least are disincentivized from trying again? But I don't know. Restorative justice is one of those umbrella terms that can relate to a lot of things. Maybe they'll be talking about restorative justice in schools, where it could make more sense when you have children involved and you're not talking about necessarily serious crimes, depending. I don't know. We'll see. So anyway, that's the random, unprepared preamble for all of this. So let's find out what restorative justice means to our speakers from, what was it again? State House Futures, whatever that is.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Oh, by the way, I didn't prep the audio for this at all, so I hope it's not terrible. If it's terrible, I'm sunk. But of course, with 3 different cameras, Zoom calls, your mileage is going to vary anyway.
I'm excited to see. Well, I can't see any faces, but the number of people apparently watching this going up, that's in itself very exciting.
That's usually what it does for me. I'm glad to have anybody watching the kind of stuff I do.
My name is Inkatia or Ink Verco. I'm the policy organizer at the Democracy Policy Network on restorative justice, and I will be moderating today's exceptional panel on restorative justice for this year's State House Futures Summit.
Oh, okay. That's something. Panel? I don't know. Can you have a panel of two? I guess you can have a panel of two. It seems like it's kind of a small panel. Seems if you only have two people, isn't it more of just like a discussion? I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a snob. Oh, also, Ebony Williams, good evening. Alice Morgan, good evening. Timothy Seelbeck, and senior staff reporter and chief Florida correspondent Colleen Byrne. Yay!
So the current legal system fails to address the needs of harmed parties, offending parties, and communities writ large.
How so?
Its failure is costly in more ways than one.
My mind is open. How do you mean?
However, as more and more communities and states are discovering, restorative justice is an alternative.
Depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about low-level crimes or crimes that don't have any inherent victims like drug possession, things like that, diversionary programs, something other than incarceration might make sense depending on the circumstances of the case. But I don't know what you mean, so we'll wait and see.
So restorative justice, as many of you may be familiar with, is a conceptualization of crime as harm between parties instead of as an infraction against the state.
Harm between parties? Don't you mean harm against one party by another party?
It reorients our focus toward the people most impacted and also most able to address harms.
Most impacted, those would be the victims, correct?
And so today we'll be hearing from advocates who have devoted so much time and so much energy to documenting and fighting for the implementation of these lofty principles and putting them into practice.
Okay.
So on our panel, we have here Tariq Masrani. Tariq is a restorative justice practitioner at the Honeycomb Justice Consulting.
Honeycomb Justice Consulting. I could be mistaken, but that guy's name and his face seem very familiar to me. Maybe I've seen him on a panel about this subject before or something. I wouldn't be surprised. Also, Zan Wild, what are you doing up so late, Scribelight? And hi, well, I'm doing this. So that answers that.
Group. In 2012, he convened and coordinated the DC Alliance for Restorative Practices, a network of practitioners, police, educators, officials, and advocates aimed at supporting the integration of restorative practices in the district. Okay. Tariq has trained, advised, and otherwise supported the DC Office of the Attorney General, the Nevada Attorney General's Office, and the Virginia Commonwealth Attorney's offices in implementing restorative justice as an alternative to prosecution.
Okay, well then, at least on that score, we have a practiced professional / expert, which is good.
He's also a visiting assistant professor at Eastern Mennonites University's Center for Justice and Peace Building.
Justice and Peace Building, okay.
We also have Alicia Varani, and Alicia is the Rosalind and Arthur Gilbert Foundation Director of the Criminal Justice Program at UCLA School of Law. There, she directs a policy and research agenda focused on decarceration efforts, with a particular focus on issues of pretrial detention and restorative and transformative justice.
Pretrial detention, so I'm assuming things like cash bail and things like that. That's a whole other subject that I've covered before that I have some, reasonable concerns about, but also no idea how to address it otherwise.
Alicia is also a co-chair of the Los Angeles Alternatives to Incarceration Pretrial Subcommittee, and as a staff attorney at the California Conference for Equality and Justice, created and directed a restorative justice community conferencing program that continues to divert LA County's youth out of the juvenile justice system each year.
Now, see, again, restorative justice for juveniles or youth who are not of adult age yet, who may have committed relatively minor crimes or misdemeanors and things. That, to me, seems like the most prime demographic for the implementation of restorative practices rather than incarceration and so on. But again, all depends on the circumstances of the case, of course. But yeah, if you can divert a child effectively from patterns or behaviors early enough on, then hopefully you can obviously have them avoid a more tumultuous and darker future. But after they become adults and once the crimes become more serious, that's where it gets kind of iffy for me. It all comes to a case-to-case basis. Derek LaRue, thank you so much. What are you doing up at this hour? What are you doing up at this hour? Why, being just completely generous and supportive as always. Thank you so much, Derek. I really appreciate it. Hope I earn your generosity, as it were, on this odd night for me to be doing this. Ahoy! Ahoy, mateys. And did I say hello to Resolute Germ? If I didn't say hello to Resolute Germ, hello, Resolute Germ. Okay.
So with those introductions out of the way, I'll turn it over to each of our panelists to give an introductory statement. And we'll just start with Alicia.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Hello to all those who are watching. I'll just start with a little bit of an overview of the work that folks in California are doing as sort of a lessons learned and jumping off point for restorative justice.
Okay, just as a note, the audio for her speaking versus her audio, or the visual of her speaking and the audio, are completely out of sync. That's, I guess, just a part of the original recording. If that matters, I'm hoping most people listening / watching this are mostly listening to this because there's not a whole lot to see, but you know.
Legislation. So as mentioned, my role is really to provide research and legal support to folks interested in thinking about how to legislate, how and whether we should legislate around restorative justice. And so late last year, a group of practitioners, restorative justice practitioners across the state of California, decided to start coming together to understand how they could be impactful in the policy arena and how they could be looked to as experts rather than traditional criminal legal system actors.
Okay. Oh, holy cats. Brittany Holland, thank you so much for the good luck, dancy, well, it's kind of dancy, but, you know, blowhorn, foghorn, megaphone. That's what I was looking for. That's the word I was looking for, megaphone. Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wow. Wow.
There's a Sinatra Says Dogcat Fox. Also, by the way, just to help boost a friend, Sinatra Says has a new video out the other day. Sinatra Says is a channel called Sinatra's Speakeasy. And he just did a video yesterday, I think it was, where he comes up with some cocktails using 1990s brand-ish type materials, for those of you that are interested in such things. So go check out Sinatra's Speakeasy on YouTube for that. He's also got other videos from his previous endeavors as well. But thank you, Brittany Holland. Oh, Brittany, you're fine. You're fine. You're good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You didn't make a mistake. You made no mistake. You're perfectly fine. Thank you. Okay, so how can we encourage state legislators to implement restorative justice programs, or how to?
And so, you know, what I've learned from this process is that first, anyone trying to be engaged in policy and legislation in your state should really be looking first and foremost to people in communities with direct experience, both leading restorative justice processes, as well as people who have been participants in those processes.
Whoa, Brittany, holy cow. Brittany, I honestly do not know what to say. That's ridiculously generous of you. You didn't have to do that. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. I will be paying it forward. That is so generous of you. I will find a way to, as I say, balance the karmic scales a bit. That's so nice of you. Thank you, Brittany, so much. Well, Humbled. That's the word I'm llooking for. Humbled. The poverty of my vocabulary after such a gesture. Thank you so much, Brittany. I hope as with anything anybody ever donates, I really hope that I earn your generosity. Okay, guys. Okay. Derek LaRue, again, I feel like I should be running a telethon here or something. Okay, this is, thank you. Thank you. Jeez. Okay, I don't know how much more Hallmark card my instincts want to make me here, but I don't know what to say. I don't want to say other than I'm going to do my best to pay it forward. I have my my favorite charities that I try to give to as often as I can, and I'll certainly be doing so on your honor within in very short time. Thank you guys so much. I rarely think that that anything that I do is really worthy of that much generosity. So I thank you for it, and I'm humbled and struck dumb by it. But rather than keep mumbling, let me get on with the show that you guys appreciate this much. Thank you.
And so that's really who we brought together in our coalition, which is now called the California Restorative Justice Policy Coalition. And the first thing that we did was to understand what practitioners across the state needed and what their concerns were around legislation. And so we did focus groups and surveys of people across the state. And what really came out was that it was a few things around legislation. One is that practitioners were really in need of robust state funding.
Yes, I assume you're always in need of money. I hope that over the course of this some odd 40-minute talk, they get into more details about exactly what it is that they're trying to do, where it's going to apply, and how this, it really comes down to me, how does this serve the victims the best? Unless you're talking about quote unquote victimless crimes in the sense that there's not an individual who has been harmed by whatever crime we're talking about, might be, some kind of misdemeanor possession or something like that. How does this process help victims, actual victims of crime? And where is the line? This is a question I ask nearly with every restorative justice program I look at, or something that I want to hear about. There has to be a line where restorative justice just is not an option for certainly the most serious crimes. We're talking like aggravated assault, murder, other kinds of assault that I'll leave off on the off chance YouTube gets in a tizzy over it. You can imagine what I'm talking about. Or something like Bernie Madoff levels of fraud. Where is the line where restorative justice just does not make sense? Like, name a degree of a crime and then down where it's possible. I guess we'll see.
That had no strings attached. Every organization felt they could have greater reach with more funding.
Whoa. More funding with no strings attached? Okay, so you want to have legislation passed that allots to the practitioners a blank check. Did I hear that right? Let me back up a little bit because that didn't.
And so we did focus groups and surveys of people across the state. And what really came out was that it was a few things around legislation.
Wait a sec. Old Guy Gamer. Greetings and salutations, Mr. Scribe. Got my 10-year coin tonight. Okay, unless I'm a complete dunderhead, and I could be, and clarify it if I am. That means you've been 10 years sober. This I don't think I've done this before because I don't really have something for this. I want you to take this in the sense of celebration for that, Old Guy Gamer. Congratulations. That is an amazing feat, and good on you for the willpower and the stamina and what it takes to achieve something like that. That's nothing to be taken lightly. And I congratulate you and everybody in the chat. Give Old Guy Gamer some props for that, because that's something else. That's good on you, man. Good on you. It's not, as I'm sure you know, it is not an easy row to hoe, as it were. And 10 years is quite an accomplishment. So good on you, and keep it up. I know it's a lifelong struggle. I have friends and family who have struggled with it themselves, and some haven't been as successful, not nearly as successful as you. So good on you, and congratulations on that. I hope you're enjoying your evening, and I hope, for whatever it's worth, that this is in part a celebration of that achievement.
One is that practitioners were really in need of robust state funding that had no strings attached.
Yeah, no. You're not getting robust taxpayer money with no strings attached. That's not how it works, I'm afraid. So I think that might be a poison pill.
Every organization felt they could have greater reach with more funding and have that be supported through state legislation. There are concerns about funding being tied to certain requirements for restorative justice programs, but
yeah, I'm sure there would be concerns that you'd have to actually qualify for it in some way, like, I don't know, approach the state with some kind of comprehensive plan, or with some kind of certification from the people involved, or some kind of evidence that what you were going to attempt had some efficacy elsewhere, not just being given a chunk of money gratis. I mean, come on.
I can get into the concerns later.
Okay.
The other thing that practitioners mentioned was that they wanted to see the elimination of eligibility barriers. So there have been quite a few studies that show that restorative justice really works most effectively with violent incidents and more serious incidents. And so,
really? Restorative justice works best with violent and serious incidents. So a subtraction or an absence of prosecution or incarceration, though, that works best with violent and serious incidents. I'd love to know how that's supposed to work, and or what she's citing.
Making sure that restorative justice is available to all, rather than legislating around narrowing the group of people who can access restorative justice. And
no, okay. Narrowing the group of people who can access restorative justice. There has to be a qualification. There has to be. Just anybody can. Okay, so a serial killer. I mean, that's the most serious, right? Or at least probably one of the most serious ones. So a serial killer should have access to restorative justice, a situation where there is no prosecution and or no incarceration. I really hope she firms up what she's talking about, because these are always my questions. What do you do with the serial killer? What do you do with the Bernie Madoff? What do you do with the Ted Bundy, you know?
And finally, third, they also wanted comprehensive confidentiality protections. So confidentiality protections in law would protect anything that is said by anyone in a restorative justice process from being admissible in later court proceedings. And
wait. So you want a blank check of taxpayer money with no strings attached. You want no prerequisites or requirements for who qualifies to take part in this, and you want it to all be off the record. Okay, you know, just one of those, I'll be kind and call them requests, would probably completely harpoon any chance of this passing in a state legislature with even a brain cell between the aisles. But all three of those things put together, yeah, maybe I'm just a cynic. I don't know, but I don't see those things passing muster. I really don't.
And this is incredibly important to the restorative justice process, because people need to be open and honest about the harm that they caused.
And not be held accountable for it in a court of law? Really? So everybody involved in the restorative justice process, as being described, effectively becomes in the same role as an attorney. And anything said in this room doesn't go beyond this room and cannot be used against you in a court of law. So in this system, I could confess the most terrible things ever in front of a whole room full of people, and none of them could testify against me, including the victim. Could if the victim is present, and that is a key component of most descriptions of restorative justice processes. If the victim is present as I confess all of my sins, the victim of my crime can't testify against me. Is that what I'm to understand? What?
And they need to not be fearing retribution from what they're going to say.
Well, okay, this is why we have the right to remain silent in the first place, right? That's why it's the burden of the state to prove someone's guilt, is that you're not required to say anything in the first place. That anything you do say can be used against you in a court of law. But now you want to create a forum where I could confess everything to a room full of people and none of it can be used against me. What is the, okay, never mind.
And so that was really important for practitioners in the state of California, and I think across the country. And then finally, one of the big concerns was a fear around co-optation, and worrying that legislation would lead to systems actors being in control of restorative justice rather than having community-based organizations really taking the lead.
If you're accepting federal money, if you're accepting state taxpayer money to fund this stuff, I'm sorry, you don't get to just run around rampant without anybody checking over your shoulder. Okay, the whole no strings attached, we don't have any regulations, we don't have to have any qualifications or prerequisites, all of it gets to be anonymous. No. If you're accepting state money, there is going to be transparency. I hate to tell you this. The minute you start asking for a blank check from the state, you're done. I think that is a deal breaker from the get-go.
Worried that legislation could lead to a professionalization of the career path of restorative justice that can often exclude people if you need expensive certifications or trainings.
Yeah, why have... we're not even 10 minutes into this thing, and the entire infrastructure this lady is describing of what she and or practitioners of restorative justice want, even before we get to the actual process itself, just is an absolute non-starter. So you want free money with no oversight. You want anonymity and confidentiality on everything. You want there to be no barriers to who qualifies for this stuff. And you don't want to have any kind of certification or qualifications or anything to participate and or work in this sphere. You just want to show up, say you're a restorative justice practitioner, keep it all community-based, and draw a nonprofit paycheck from it? Come on. Is this a joke? I would be impressed if this was some kind of performance art joke or something. Otherwise, this is honestly kind of baffling, kind of amazing in a way.
And a concern that people most impacted by the criminal legal system would be sort of cut out of being able to be a part of these processes.
There it is, the criminal legal system. They don't call it the criminal justice system because there's no justice. And the way that they emphasize these words, the legal system itself is criminal. That's how I've always kind of interpreted it in sort of a sardonic way. I love this new phraseology.
So that was sort of our first foray into the research, and I'll talk really quickly about the bill that's moving forward in California
okay.
before I pass it along.
Now, California, I'll admit, California is the one place in the nation where I could see something this ludicrous actually gaining traction.
So the AB 60 is an assembly bill sponsored by Assemblymember Isaac Bryan in California, and it provides victims with the right to be notified of the availability of community-based restorative justice programs. And
the right of victims to be notified of the availability of community restorative justice programs. So I have my house broken into. Now I have the right to know that there's a restorative justice program in my community. Is the restorative justice program going to bring me back my stolen goods? Is the restorative justice program going to set me at ease that the person who violated my safety, my privacy, and my home will not be able to do so again, at least for a time commensurate to the crime he committed? Is that what the community restorative justice program is going to do if I'm notified of its existence?
And processes. The goal of the bill is to increase awareness about restorative justice and to empower victims and survivors to advocate for RJ for themselves if they so choose.
Advocate for restorative. Okay. Victims and survivors. If I choose to advocate for restorative justice. Okay. If I'm a really forgiving person, let's say, right? I'm just a saint among saints. What's stopping me from doing that right now? Like if they catch the guy, right? Let's say my house is broken into. I'll make it a very minor crime in relative terms. My house is broken into, my stereo's stolen. They catch the guy, right? What's preventing me from going to the prosecutor and saying, I forgive this person. I know that you're going to press charges on him anyway, but for my part, please go easy on him. What's stopping me right now from doing that? If I felt inclined to do so, it's up to the prosecutor ultimately, but maybe I'd have a say, or maybe they take my input to heart. But okay.
It is anticipated that this bill will pass, and the coalition really feels like what is most important is how it is implemented. So questions remain of how will victims and survivors be notified? When will they be notified? By whom? How will people talk about what restorative justice is? It's very important that people understand and communicate accurately the power and the process of restorative justice. So
yes, that's what I'm waiting for you to do here, because notified about it. So what? Do they catch the guy? Right? Is the guy currently in jail being held over for trial? Oh, wait, we don't have that anymore because restorative justice seeks to do away with arrest and incarceration and prosecution. So what is the point of being notified about a restorative justice program? What is that supposed to do for me as a victim?
Who will be doing all of that? So the coalition is prepared to be very engaged in how this right to notice is operationalized.
Right to notice.
So I'll stop there and happy to answer questions.
Good. I have many. Hopefully some are asked.
Awesome. So I'll just pop it to Tarek to also give a bit of an introductory statement. And then after that, we can go right ahead into our conversation.
Okay.
Thank you, Ink, and thank you, Alicia. So there's a lot to say on this topic. Honored to be here. I'm going to try not to repeat some of the things that have already been said.
Okay.
Although I think they're worth reiterating. So maybe I will.
I'll try not to repeat things, but I want to hear myself talk about them, so I will.
Let me go through my notes here. First of all, I want to give my sense. Well, before anything, I want to say that, like, in terms of understanding the legislative landscape nationally,
yes.
I highly recommend, following up.
Oh no!
I'm going to put in the chat box here an article by Talia Gonzalez, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us yet, at least, that looks at an overview of what's happening in the states in terms of legislation.
Now, just as a note, I think somebody else is going to pop in at some point because the thumbnail for this had 4 people on it. So presumably we're going to have another guest eventually. That might make things more interesting. Maybe that's who he's talking about.
I can tell you from my perspective, which has been mostly on the East Coast with the exception of Nevada and Utah, that mostly what's been happening legislatively is that you have some really localized, robust implementation by non-governmental and increasingly governmental agencies. in restorative justice. That's
Okay.
happening primarily in two areas. It's happening in the criminal system and in the educational system.
Yeah, like I said, the educational system amongst youth, students, and or juvenile offenders, that area, that place within someone's lifespan, let's say, that, again, depending on what we're talking about, makes the most sense to me for restorative practices to be implemented. As long as we're not talking about serious crimes, so as long as we're talking about something where some redress can be made or some diversionary program can be implemented, yes. So, yes, schools and juvenile court. That's where most of it makes sense. And then above that, say, diversionary programs for like possession of drugs or very low-level drug crimes, things like that, where you can possibly give somebody the option of, well, okay, either you get jail or you go off to rehab or you follow these steps and you have to do a rigorous program of getting yourself straightened out, that kind of thing. So youth and sort of crimes of self-harm, let's say, those are the areas where the restorative justice process makes the most sense to me as a layman. But beyond that, that's where you start having to give me some more information. Thank you, Keeverdam. Hi, sorry I'm late. Fundraisers and shit. Okay, first off, Keeverdam, you're not late. This wasn't planned, so there's no schedules. You violated no calendar or schedule, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for your generosity. And yes, the fundraiser at the top of the chat box, everybody. Speaking of generosity, so our friend Twisted Skipster has a friend themselves named Tracy, and Tracy has found herself in, I'm assuming Tracy is a woman. I mean, I've met men named Tracy before. Either way, Tracy, pronouns unknown, has hit some life difficulties and is in need of some help. Not a lot of help. I think the total fundraiser goal is about $1,000. If you have a couple of bucks to spare, please consider taking a look at that and donating. If you can't donate, that's perfectly fine. But if you can share that out on social media, that would be appreciated. Keeverdam, you are the most loyal of loyal supporters and helpers for this channel. You're the den mother of the chat. You have nothing to apologize for. I will say that every time you say anything that is even nearing an apology for anything, you have nothing to apologize for. And that's not a criticism. I just want you to know that to be so. And anyway, thank you so much. But either way, let's keep going.
Legislation, when it exists, is limited and in some ways is supportive. It doesn't mandate things. It doesn't provide much. It doesn't actually address some of the legislative issues or blocks to restorative justice.
Legislation doesn't address legislative blocks?
At least this is in my experience in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area.
Okay.
And it doesn't provide budgeting, which is an important part of restorative justice growing legislatively. In terms of one thing that really needs to be noted in terms of legislation is that there is a profound danger in legislating restorative justice and having it actually undermine restorative justice. We're seeing this in a number of jurisdictions.
Okay, I'm going to need that explained. How does legislating restorative justice undermine restorative justice? Unless you're talking about legislation involving restorative justice setting conditions, limits, and transparencies to the process, because if that's what you're going to cite as being limiting, given what the previous speaker's description of what she and her cohort want out of legislation, yeah, sorry, you're not going to have a lot of sympathy from me.
Particularly in the education space. So legislation is being passed that is incomplete.
How?
That sets unrealistic expectations.
Like what?
And that is unfunded.
Unfunded. Okay. I really hope they give us some details.
And is requiring particularly like school districts
to
work miracles. And when they don't happen, then restorative justice is getting a bad rap.
Well, like what? What are the expectations? What are the requirements? What are the prerequisites? What can school districts not attain? What?
For me, this comes closest to home in the Clark County School District in Las Vegas, where I've been doing work in Nevada.
Okay.
And what we're seeing there is an uptick of violence in schools. Very concerning, not to minimize this as an issue at all, but similar to what's happening across school districts in the country. A lot of it related probably to pandemic effects.
Okay, while the pandemic certainly had an effect on stunting student development and education, I'd be curious to know how they draw a line between post-pandemic effects and increased violence. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just not sure that I'd heard that one before.
And other stressors, but that is now being attributed to pre-pandemic legislation.
Wait. So increased violence in schools could be the result of post-pandemic stress, but is now being attributed to pre-pandemic legislation? What?
Which in the Clark County and Nevada state context wasn't well done, the legislation in terms of restorative justice.
What, like how? What was done inadequately? What is wrong with it?
So I can't emphasize enough the importance of being very thoughtful with restorative justice legislation.
I can appreciate thoughtful. Could you give us some thoughts on what you're talking about?
And I'm going to get through a few recommendations.
Okay.
I do want to note also that there's a tendency to assess restorative justice by a completely different standard than what we hold the criminal system or the educational punitive zero tolerance system to.
Yeah, because it's a completely different thing. Restorative justice eschews penalty. It eschews the classic system of due process and sentencing and guilty, not guilty, and so on. It's a rare day, if at all, where I hear an argument for restorative justice that talks about the due process of actually determining guilt in the first place before restorative justice takes place. Oftentimes, it's just assumed that we know who the guilty party is and who the victim is, and then we just proceed forward with a restorative justice program. So, yes, they are assessed differently because it's a completely different beast.
Exclusionary discipline system, too.
Here, let me back up a little bit. I cut him off.
I can't emphasize enough the importance of being very thoughtful with restorative justice legislation. And I'm going to get through a few recommendations. I do want to note also that there's a tendency to assess restorative justice by a completely different standard than what we hold the criminal system or the educational punitive zero tolerance system to, the exclusionary discipline system to. We're expected with restorative justice to have perfect outcomes. We're not expected to have any recidivism. We're expected to see short-term gains. We don't expect that of our traditional systems.
Nobody in their right mind would expect a 100% perfection rate of any system. What I would want to see from restorative justice advocates and practitioners is numbers showing this is how things were before restorative justice was implemented in this area of criminal justice or whatever. And this is how the recidivism rate was afterwards. Here are the case studies. Here are the individuals who went through it. Here's how they operated before in the classic criminal justice system. And this is what happened afterwards. If someone is expecting from restorative justice or classic criminal justice system, due process, etc., if anybody's expecting a 100% perfection rate, I don't know that person is operating as a serious adult. Okay. And I'd be surprised to hear that any rational, reasonable person is holding that standard up to restorative justice or anything else and could be taken seriously. So I wouldn't expect a 100% perfection rate from restorative justice, no matter what we're talking about. Because at the end of the day, people are people. They're not perfect, and the systems they create are not perfect.
And I think it's time to shift the narrative, if anything, to ask for us to be comparing apples to apples. Should I go into some of my recommendations now?
Please do, because I'm already bored, and you guys haven't said anything of substance yet.
Ink, or leave that for the subsequent.
We have time, so yeah, spend a minute or two.
Okay, good.
Okay, so a few high-level things,
All right.
and maybe we'll get more into the details.
Okay.
High-level principles. Make sure that when you're legislating for restorative justice,
Mhm.
one is make sure that there is access to adequate resources and support.
Access to adequate resources and support. What does that mean?
That you're not requiring implementation of things that take budget and time and personnel, and there's no support for whether it's a school district or it's a criminal system to be able to get that.
Wait. Are we talking about free money again? Are we just talking about funding? Is that what he's talking about?
2, allow for adequate time for implementation. Don't require restorative justice implementation in a school district over the course of 1 or 2 years and expect the outcomes that come along with that in such a short time frame. Have a 5 to 10-year vision. That's usually how long it takes place. It's needed in order to implement well and start to see the long-term results.
Well, obviously you have very little knowledge of, or not acknowledging, the electoral cycle. People need to see results within 2 to 4 years, usually so they can brag about it by the time their next election comes around. I don't know that that is a barrier you're ever going to break through, especially if you're asking for free money from the state. I don't think it's going to happen. Also, I clicked on the wrong thing, but also, yes. Hello, Professor Chaos. Thank you so much. Scribby, how you been, bro? It's been a summer so far. I'm doing okay. Tonight especially, I've been, what's a word I haven't used so far? Gobsmacked by everyone's generosity and attendance at a completely ambushed stream. So I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Professor Chaos? Hope you're doing well. Yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. What were we talking about? Oh, yeah, right. You want to have all the money, but no requirements. You want to have all the time in the world to do whatever you're going to do and not have any oversight, even though you're working with politicians and legislatures and things. Okay, and what else? What are your recommendations otherwise?
Number 3, avoid imposing restorative justice implementation, particularly on systems that are resistant to it.
Like what?
Instead, supporting those who naturally want to go and integrate restorative justice, and then letting the successes in those places spread out organically.
Maybe it's too late in the night for me to think. I don't know what any of that was supposed to have meant.
Finally, avoid a kind of checklist approach to restorative justice.
Okay, dude, I'm sorry. And for the First Lady as well. You are not going to get money from the state without benchmarks, expectations, and measurable successes. You're just not. Okay? You're going to have a plan. You're going to have something to back up. Obviously, there's no guarantee in life, right? There's no guarantee. If you say to the legislators, here's what restorative justice programs in this state or in this community or in this country have done for their communities in the past and this, that, and the other, we feel as if we project that if we're given 2 years of funding and this, that, and the other, that we can see a drop in recidivism by this much. And then if we continue projected over 5 to 10 years, we can see this result. Okay. And then they're going to check in with you. They're going to check in with you either every year or every 2 years. And they're going to say, okay, well, where are your numbers at? Can we justify continuing to fund this thing? If we're seeing results, then we have an argument. If we're not seeing results, well, then it's a harder sell to make to the electorate. You don't get a blank check. You don't get no oversight. You guys are you've ended your race before the starter pistol has even fired. And it has nothing to do with restorative justice. It's not even a pushback on the concept of restorative justice. If this was anything, and you were asking for this much leeway, this much freedom, this much, a hands-off approach to it from state legislators, you'd be done. I don't know how you expect to accomplish any of this.
Do A, B, and C. Make sure you have this number of trainings. Credentialing is an issue that Alicia brought up. I agree with. And look at principles.
No. Principles can't be measured. Principles can't be budgeted for. Principles cannot be checked to see if you're spending the money wisely. No.
Really make sure you're able to capture the principles of restorative justice that are more than providing a particular service. I'd like to speak more to the needs within the particular criminal education context, but maybe I'll hand it back up to you, and I'm sure those will figure into the subsequent discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you, Tarek and Alicia, for those really helpful and really focusing opening statements.
I don't know how helpful they were. Well, I mean, they were helpful in the sense that they gave me an idea of the overall theme of what's being demanded / required by restorative justice advocates when it comes to legislation, when it comes to government oversight, lack thereof, and funding. So I guess in that sense, it was educational.
So I have a few questions for both of you, and so maybe I'll ask you first, Tarek, based on a lot of this work that you've done and these experiences across a variety of spaces in the legal system.
Yeah.
And you just kind of touched actually to kind of anticipated this question by saying that a focus where there's already support for restorative justice than rather than where there's resistance. So in your experience, what have been the institutions, agencies, and the like that have been more open and receptive to restorative justice policies and principles?
Okay, I appreciate this question because that was the one thing you brought up that I had no idea what he was talking about. Yeah, sure. You want to go for the path of least resistance when you're trying to implement a new program, right? Don't want to waste your time, throwing yourself up against a brick wall. All right. So yeah, what is a receptive organization or branch of the government or something, and what isn't?
And which are the ones where you've encountered more pushback? And is there any trend across locations, or is this something that's varied across states and jurisdictions?
Yeah. Again, not really being able to speak to the sort of nationwide landscape, and referring you back to Dr. Gonzalez's work. From my perspective, I see an incredible emergence since George Floyd.
Oh, can I get through any discussion these days without George Floyd being brought up? I mean, I hear it all the time with diversity, DEI, and all that kind of stuff, but man, it's just, what does George Floyd have to do with this?
Of progressive prosecutors who are actually really pushing restorative justice in many ways.
Oh, yeah. No, they're pushing it quite a bit in Portland, in Seattle, in San Francisco. Oh, yeah. Progressive prosecutors. Boy, oh, boy. And look how those towns are now. Look at the state of those towns. And not just those, but across the country. You got a progressive liberal prosecutor. Look at the condition of those cities. It is an utter tragedy.
I have incredibly awe-inspiring stories in some of the work I've been doing in Virginia, particularly with the Commonwealth Attorney in Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Arlington County, of prosecutors who are even willing to take from their own budget to support restorative justice diversion programs.
Okay, I don't know what's going on in Arlington or what he was talking about, or Charlottesville or whatever. I hear most about the left coast as the best coast, just because I kind of live near it. But okay, are things just utopian over on the East Coast?
So I think that that's certainly not true for all jurisdiction, but there are many. I think that there's a lot of potential these days, at least coming from the prosecuting offices itself. And I would be remiss if not to mention what's happening in DC, where the Office of Attorney General since 2015 has set up a very innovative in-house restorative justice program, where there are now, within the next year or so, scheduled to be more restorative justice practitioners working within the prosecutor's office than attorneys.
Is that good or bad news for DC? I wonder, and I don't know, I'd be curious to find out, what has the crime rate been in DC between 2015 and now? Or I guess maybe 2022 probably has the most recent numbers. In those 7 years, how's the crime rate in DC gone? Up, down, sideways?
Themselves, and it's shifting the culture of the office itself. They're expanding into young adults, and even catching the eye of the federal, the district attorneys.
Okay, speak as to the success of it. The fact that more of it is being done doesn't tell me anything. What has the recidivism rate been since implementing the restorative justice programs in DC? Up, down, sideways. What has the crime rate been in DC since 2015? Up, down, sideways. If restorative justice as an idea, as a notion, as a principle in prosecutors' offices is somehow a good thing, then tell me about the conditions of cities up and down the West Coast who have implemented that kind of thinking. If not a program itself, an explicitly stated program, but liberal prosecutors effectively decriminalizing crime. What has the effect been? Don't just chalk up the preponderance of that thinking as a success. What have the results been?
And in referring cases. Another place where I see restorative justice agencies is certainly in the school sector. So we have certainly school and school leaders, public and charter particularly. They tend to have more sort of freedom and mobility to innovate, but in school systems as well, yes. You see a lot of potential, I think, for restorative justice coming on.
Okay, as I said before, yeah, the two areas that for sure restorative justice probably makes the most sense is in schools and the juvenile justice system. When you've got non-adults, underage kids, and encountering problems in school or minor crimes or showing tendencies thereto or whatever, that is the best place and makes the most sense for restorative practices versus prosecution or incarceration, obviously. Okay. So you're not going to get a whole lot of pushback from me on that one. All right. So, but that's not my concern. My concern is when you start talking about adults and serious crime. So still waiting to hear how they plan to do that. But we're talking about legislation. Is that all this is going to be? I don't know. I mean, well, I guess the organization is called State House Futures. So I guess maybe it is mostly about politics and legislators. Or maybe I need to click over here.
Where things go slow is typically in the courts.
You don't say. The courts have pushback to non-court due process prosecutorial system. Yeah.
Working with judges. Police departments, it's mixed, but largely police departments are very slow to pick up on this, particularly when we're dealing with more serious or adult cases.
You don't say. Yeah, I can't imagine why. Also, the fact that restorative justice classically also advocates for either the defunding of or the abolition of law enforcement, as well as prisons. So you're going to have to you might have to come up with some kind of different term, because restorative justice is a catch-all. It really does become a poison pill for anybody working in law enforcement or the criminal justice system.
That said, juvenile justice agencies
Yes.
have been very receptive and have been part of the restorative justice kind of movement for decades now, in various pockets around the country. So
makes sense.
Keep it at that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe bringing Alicia into this conversation a bit. So Tarek, you mentioned restorative justice practitioners in the Attorney General's office. And so Alicia, I know you were talking in terms of your work with the California Restorative Justice Policy Coalition, this fear of co-optation, whether in the legislation itself or in implementation. And so I'm curious, so I guess this question, one for Tarek, like how do you counter that sort of co-optation when you have that
co-optation? What? Obviously, my vocabulary is lacking. What is co-optation in this context?
That sort of closeness between current systems actors and then restorative principals and practitioners. And then Alicia, in your experience, how have you and advocates in California looked to combat that sort of co-optation, both in the bill writing process and then also afterwards when the bill is written, and then trying to make sure that the implementation of it actually looks like what actually represents the values.
Is that what co-optation is? It's like I make a proposal, then it has to go through the people who are the adults in the room and know the process, and it might not come out the same way as what I wanted originally. Is that what co-optation is? I thought that was called like collaboration and or compromise, because you're not going to get everything that you want, right? It's like a script writer, and I'm thinking of Script Doctor all of a sudden, sells a script, and then it goes to a studio, and the producers have their notes, and then they might get a rewrite on it and that kind of thing. It's been co-opted, but of course it's been purchased. In this case, you're proposing legislation, and the first draft goes through committee, and then it becomes this and that and the other, and then there are compromises, there are things taken out and things put in, and it's a whole process. What it sounds like is they don't want to have anyone having any say other than what they have, or they want, I should say. So no certification, no oversight, no transparency, anonymity, and on and on and on. We get free money, and you guys can't tell us how or what to do with it. That's what I've heard so far.
Of restorative justice.
Mm-hmm. Anybody? I mean, you didn't really make it clear who was supposed to talk next. I guess you kind of said that Tarek was supposed to talk, but is it her turn?
Yeah, it's a really hard thing. And I dropped a link to our report that does a little bit of tracking of the ways in which various states have kind of really, through law, encouraged the integration of the criminal legal system with restorative justice. And there's much debate about whether restorative justice should be included and embedded and an option within the criminal legal system, or whether it should be a true alternative. And I don't think people across the board who identify as restorative justice advocates or practitioners agree necessarily.
Which is a problem. Nobody can get on the same page. Are you guys saying this should be a replacement or an alternative or a supplementary? That's the thing. Because again, if I see a presentation on restorative justice, my mind goes in several different directions after listening to so many presentations on this in the past. Because you can be for restorative justice and the total abolition of prisons and police, or you can be for restorative justice and understand it to be a diversionary option, or you can be some mix thereof. If you don't know what you're getting into using the terms that you're using, maybe you need to refine your terms. I'm just saying.
But within the coalition here in California, there seems to be very strong agreement about trying to keep restorative justice in the hands of community, while at the same time understanding that systems actors are referral sources. So I think what a lot of people are trying to think through is, if you get a referral for a restorative justice case from a district attorney or from a law enforcement agency, how do we limit information sharing with those agencies? So either through confidentiality protections or other protocols, how do we ensure that there's no racial bias in who's getting referred to restorative justice and who's getting referred to the juvenile or criminal system?
Okay. This is a lot to take in. So again, you want zero oversight. You want taxpayer money without credentials, without official oversight. You want referrals from law enforcement or prosecutors' offices, but you want to ensure that the decisions there. So you want checks to ensure that the people being sent to you are being sent to you legitimately, but then on the reverse, you don't want anybody looking at to what you're doing or verifying that anything you're doing is fair or balanced or within reason or anything else. I'm sensing a double standard here.
So some of the ways that folks have fought back against racial disparities is by just saying, okay, every robbery is going to be referred to restorative justice. So that racial bias doesn't show up, and who's deemed as appropriate for restorative justice.
Every robbery will be referred to restorative justice. Yeah, that sounds a lot like what's going on in the West Coast cities. I mean, and I don't have any hope they're going to describe to us exactly what that looks like. Every robbery. Uh-huh.
So I think these are really big concerns that legislation could sort of feed into.
Yeah, okay, so just across the board, regardless of the circumstances of the crime, regardless of the record of the individual accused of the crime, just if you commit a robbery, no prosecution, no potential jail time, immediate diversionary program where you go through restorative justice. And what happens then? Is this before or after due process has taken place? Is this before or after you've actually determined that the person being sent to restorative justice actually committed the crime? Does the victim have to participate in the restorative justice program? And if they elect not to, does that invalidate the entire thing to begin with? Where... This is a chicken and egg question always. Okay. Has the person been convicted of the crime? Do we know for a fact they committed the crime? Okay.
One of the most interesting things to see in legislation across the country is a lot of the budget bills really tie in requirements for people to have collaboration with a prosecutor's office, for example.
Yes, if you're accepting state money, there's going to be state oversight.
Or have a referral source from prosecuting or law enforcement agencies.
Yeah.
And the coalition here is saying, we don't really want to legislate around that. So one of the ways in which that came up in our right to notice bill is really thinking through who is communicating the message, right? And of course, law enforcement are the people, for the most part, who are the first point of contact after an act of violence has happened. And so
you don't say. So what should be the process? I get my teeth knocked out on the street, and instead of calling the police immediately, I should do what?
Thinking through, what are the resources that law enforcement can give that speaks from the voice of community-based restorative justice practitioners. Because people may be reluctant to participate in restorative justice if it's recommended by law enforcement, if there is a relationship or history of distrust within that particular community.
So you want restorative justice to operate independently from both law enforcement and the criminal justice system, because you don't want, and this is just my terminology for the sake of metaphor, you don't want the stink of the criminal legal system on your pure and righteous process. Okay, so this makes absolutely no sense. You want taxpayer money, but you want to remain independent from oversight by the state. That is the message I'm getting here. 100%.
So really thinking through, how do we notify people? How do people understand that restorative justice is really supposed to be community-based and victim-centered and really focused on the needs of each particular person involved in every incident, and that it's very flexible and oriented towards what has just happened for every different person.
Wait. Okay. Again, and I know I'm asking rhetorically. All right, I'm gonna imagine a situation here. Okay, so I get assaulted, right? I get my teeth knocked out and I'm lying on the street and I got my cell phone in my hand. And I'm living in a universe where I have two numbers I can call. I've got 911, which is for the cops, and then I've got, I don't know, 876-5309. And that's the restorative justice number. And so I'm sitting there, speed dial, which one do I call? Because if I call the one, I know it's completely detached from the other, and I'm going to get something different out of it for having called one versus the other. Okay. And so I call the one number and I get Jenny, right? And Jenny says, I'm here to support you, oh victim of crime, but I'm not the police. Okay. As I'm laying there, injured on the ground, what as a victim can I expect to get in the way of support or redress from Jenny versus calling 911, having the cops show up, take a statement, and look for the guy that just beat me up? I know I'm not going to get an answer to that question here, but that is the question I want to have answered. Why would I choose to call the restorative justice line the entity that is operating completely independently from law enforcement, because I don't want law enforcement to get involved in helping find the person who beat me up, because I feel bad because I don't trust the cops, I guess. Okay.
So I just wanted to mention also that there's one piece of legislation in Illinois around school-based restorative justice that explicitly says that the restorative justice grant funds cannot be used to increase the use of school-based law enforcement or security personnel. So there are some states that are kind of explicitly saying we're going to try this different way, and we're going to do that by expending funding and not putting that funding in what we know has traditionally not worked.
Oh, okay. And all right. So in Illinois, which is just a bastion of healthy criminal justice thinking and programs, you're going to give money over to school districts, and it has to be earmarked specifically for everything except school, security, law enforcement, or whatever else. Okay, and I'm assuming this is some kind of pilot program, some kind of experiment. You don't have any numbers on its results, so who knows? Okay. Hello.
Should I jump in?
Please.
So I'd like to say a few things following up on issues of equity.
Were we talking about issues of equity? Oh, I suppose so, because she brought up, sending all robberies to restorative justice regardless of the individual.
I've broken down 7 fairly common equity issues that arise, particularly in the context of criminal diversion programs.
Okay.
I'll try to just sort of run through those quite quickly.
All right.
So first of all is the issue of net widening.
Net widening. Okay.
When RJ referrals are made for cases that wouldn't otherwise be prosecuted.
When RJ referrals are made for cases that otherwise wouldn't be prosecuted, like what?
And so important piece there is the way we've dealt with that is through our memoranda of understanding with the referral sources, that they're committing to only send cases that would otherwise be charged and prosecuted.
Oh, would otherwise be charged and prosecuted. Okay.
Second equity issue is referrals being made as early on in the criminal process as possible, ideally pre-charge, in some cases even pre-arrest.
Wait. Pre-charge or... Okay. Again, I really would need to know what exactly is a pre-charge or pre-arrest restorative justice process, because the restorative justice process, as has been spelled out to me multiple times, involves three components. Okay, three components. You have the offender, you have the victim, and you have community stakeholders. That classically, nearly every time I've had described to me exactly what a restorative justice process looks like, it has to have those three elements. That sort of triangle, right? Okay. How do you know that the person accused of the crime committed the crime? How do you know the person that says they're a victim of the crime is the victim of the crime? How do you know that the quote-unquote community stakeholders actually have a stake in anything if you've yet to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there actually is an offender and there actually is a victim? So, like always, restorative justice has nothing to do with due process. It makes assumptions of facts without evidence or deliberation. Pre-charge, pre-arrest. What, just pull somebody off of the street and send them to a restorative justice program as though they've already been convicted of something? A presumption of guilt? I know it might seem coy or quaint to say, you're presumed innocent until proven guilty, but that is a principle that has to be relied upon. It has to be maintained. Sending someone off to a restorative justice program immediately implies that they are guilty. Pre-charge, pre-arrest, how does that make any sense?
And certainly before there's a record that goes into the files.
Wait. So, before I've been arrested, before I've been charged, before there's been any paperwork done, I need to be diverted, whether I've actually committed a crime or not, before I've even been registered as being involved in the crime at all. I need to be diverted into a restorative justice program. Who is diverting me to this program? Who is shuttling me from wherever I am prior to the arrest, prior to the charge, prior to the paperwork? Who is physically going to move me from point A to point B? And what if I say no? What if I say, leave me alone? What happens then? And if I'm somehow restrained, detained by these non-law enforcement personnel who are not required to have certifications of any kind, who are effectively just glorified community activists, what happens if I get injured in transit? Who's liable for that? If they take me against my will, what happens to them? If I'm not quite in my right mind at the time, for some reason, one way or the other, who's liable for that? What are you talking about? Okay, I know, I'm a bit behind the times. I should have done this about, 30, 40, 50, a minute ago.
What? What is that?
Okay, I'm cutting it there because I'm having an experiment. I'm having an experiment to see if I don't have any swear words, does my work actually remain monetized? That's my experiment. I cut it off early. But you get the idea. You get the idea.
This is to avoid the hardship and trauma that involvement in the criminal system has.
No. So I haven't been charged with anything. I haven't been arrested yet. I have no paperwork on me, but now I'm going to be non-traumatized by being diverted to a restorative justice program that I may or may not actually be guilty of the crime I'm being accused of within the restorative. How does the restorative justice program work if I deny my responsibility? Whether I committed the crime or not, but most especially, let's say if I didn't. What happens then? What?
I will say, though, that sometimes it makes sense to have exceptions to this in order to allow for referrals also to be made post-charge. There might be institutional reasons to do this. There might be sort of political sensitivity reasons to do this. The key, though, is, are you seeing eye to eye with your referral sources that you're gradually moving towards as early on in the process as possible?
You don't want any process prior to arrest, prior to charge, prior to any paperwork. So there's no record of this person having done anything yet. And somehow you want someone to identify this person as qualifying for a restorative justice program they're going to be sent off to instead of being prosecuted. This is insane. This makes... I mean, I thought the legislative requirements that these guys were talking about earlier were nuts. I can't get over the pre-charge, pre-arrest, pre-paperwork. That's just bonkers.
So are you sort of in step, aiming towards pre-charge diversion as much as you can?
Pre-charge
the third one,
diversion.
referrals are not leaving prosecution referrals to prosecutorial discretion when there's a bias, again, particularly against people of color and other marginalized identities.
Oh, okay. So if someone falls within one of your categorizations of marginalized identities, what happens then?
This is in part issue of data tracking, like being able to track who's getting restorative justice, being referred to it, what kind of cases, etc., and then being able to go back to your referral sources and make come up with fixes to that.
Okay. Who else besides law enforcement or attorney, state attorney, whatever, who else would be referring anybody to a diversionary program? What other sources, what other referral sources would there be if not law enforcement or otherwise? I mean, it's a minor point, I guess, but I'm very confused.
So at the sort of extreme end of addressing this is doing what is being done at the DC Attorney General's office, which is having automatic referrals. They actually do this as part of their randomized control trial. So no individual is making a decision. It's randomly assigned to either restorative justice or prosecution.
It's randomly assigned. What is? Just any crime? So regardless of the history of the individual being, we can't charge anybody. There are no charges yet. They haven't been arrested yet. But okay, you're randomly assigning either prosecution or restorative justice. So there's no qualifiers. That is fair? So if two people on the same day commit the exact same crime, there's a chance that one will get the easy way out and one will get prosecuted. They did the exact same thing wrong under the law. You think that's fair, do you?
So there isn't room for...
Derek, good night. Hope you get good sleep. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for the generosity. And I hope you have a good evening. And maybe I'll see you tomorrow. I got 2 streams lined up for tomorrow. Oh my gosh, I'm just stream crazy.
For bias, and they're actually able to compare the results of restorative justice to the criminal process.
So it's just an experiment. Two guys commit the exact same crime on the same day. One gets restorative justice, one gets prosecuted, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay.
Next is the quality and outcomes of a restorative justice process not being subject to the bias of facilitators, restorative justice programs and facilitators. This is an issue for restorative practitioners to deal with through trainings, through making sure that they have representative facilitators that represent the various identities they're working with.
What? Wait, what? What are you talking about? Trainings? What trainings? We're not supposed to have any certifications. You didn't want any requirements of certification. Oh, but now there have to be trainings or facilitators? Like, oh, but for the specific identities. Well, how does that work?
It's doing the work of understanding one's own biases and being open to feedback and so forth. Number 5, referrals. Making sure that the referrals can be sourced from the community so that there's access to restorative justice that's not just through the criminal system.
Oh, wait. Okay. The community. Okay, how does that work? By all means, tell me, how does the community work? I just randomly accuse someone of a crime and they get referred?
Particularly for immigrant and other communities who are reluctant to go to the criminal system. Number 6 is making sure that as you...
Okay, you're talking about vigilante justice here. Okay, you're right. You're right on the line of advocating for vigilante justice. Okay. And not necessarily the kind that's like, somebody wears a mask and takes out a sword or something. No, I'm talking about you don't call police and you handle it within the community, quote unquote. I mean, vigilante justice doesn't necessarily have to involve violence, right? But you're talking about doing an extrajudicial process that never touches the criminal justice system. So nothing's ever filed, nothing's ever charged, no one's ever arrested, you just handle it in-house. Does that idea apply to any crime? Violent crime? Repeat offenders? Are you kidding me?
Restorative justice frees up resources because we're taking cases for a fraction of the cost of the criminal system, that the budget that is now not being used by the criminal system gets redirected into non-criminal services.
Okay. Unless you can prove a 100% recidivism rate or some drastic improvement on recidivism, you have absolutely no way to say that. Okay? Not prosecuting someone for a crime does not mean that suddenly the cost of the crimes committed by that person in the future don't become somebody else's problem. Are you kidding me? Oh, we take them off their hands. So yeah, their resources are filled up. Yeah, until that person goes off and does more stuff, conceivably. Right? Or somehow the wrong person got looped into your restorative justice program and the actual suspect got away. You cannot make that claim. You cannot make that guarantee. You've got to be kidding me.
Mental health, social public benefits programs, support programs, etc. And number 7 is that being careful that a restorative justice doesn't bolster the legitimacy of the criminal system in such a way as to lessen the political pressure on decriminalization, decarceration.
Wait. Okay, this is another. We don't want to receive too much of the taint of the criminal justice system. Hold on, let's. I want to hear that one again. Let's hear that one more time. And I think after this, I might wrap up because I'm starting to hit the wall on my energy level, and I think my voice is starting to pay the price.
Making a decision, it's randomly assigned to either restorative justice.
Oh, I went way back. Sorry about that. Let me.
To deal with through trainings, through making sure that they have representative.
Okay, I jumped far too back. Let me see.
Immigrant and other communities who are reluctant to go to the criminal system. Number 6.
Okay, we were on 7.
That a restorative justice doesn't bolster the.
Okay, there we go. Okay,
is that being careful that a restorative justice doesn't bolster the legitimacy of the criminal system.
We don't want the restorative justice to bolster the legitimacy of the criminal system, which you obviously feel is illegitimate.
In such a way as to lessen the political pressure on decriminalization, decarceration.
Right. We don't want to inadvertently help the criminal justice system as restorative justice, even though we just said that our efforts help the criminal justice system. They're not spending money on things they don't have to. So, let me get this straight. You're going to hand, but in your own interpretation of things, you're going to hand a local criminal justice system a financial windfall that they can then turn around and say to the taxpayer, look how much better we're doing managing our funds, etc. But you don't want restorative justice to bolster the legitimacy of the criminal justice system. Am I missing something here? I think I must be, because this is just absolute bonkers. Keeverdam, thank you so much. By the way, I won't be able to make the next stream aside from posting the fundraiser because I have plans. Hashtag not sorry. Okay. I appreciate it. I'm glad you've got plans. Whatever you've got going on, have fun and don't worry about the stream. If you can post the fundraiser, that's fine. I'm going to have it saved elsewise so that on the off chance, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about it. That I've got it somewhere. So it's saved, okay? Or at worst, if for some reason I can't find it or whatever, just post the link. I think I have it somewhere else, but just in case I don't, post the link into the Discord, and I'll have it. So thank you, and have fun tomorrow. Don't worry about the stream. And you're right, you have nothing to apologize for. Okay. Another couple of minutes. I'll let this guy finish his thought, and then I'm gonna wrap up.
This is the trickiest one. It's very abstract. I've been lucky enough to work with prosecutors where we can have frank conversations about this. Prosecutors who at the same time are playing their role, understandably, as within the criminal system.
Which you think is illegitimate to some degree.
At the same time as we can talk about a vision that actually reduces their role.
Yeah, except you don't want to work in concert. You've just said over and over and over again, you guys want to be as detached from law enforcement and the criminal justice system as possible, so you guys don't give them any more legitimacy than they're due. You don't want to be collaborators. You don't want to work together. You want to work independently, separate, and also vilifying the very system you say that you're going to alleviate the pressure on. Okay, you want to talk about mixed messaging here?
And that is possible by virtue of our relationship with those prosecutors.
Yeah, a relationship that is, at its very definition you've described, antagonistic.
Which is something hard to do if we were just advocates and activists. We build relationship with our prosecutors. We've even, in Charlottesville, put on informal off-the-record dialogue to talk about abolition with our prosecutors present and community members.
Abolition as in the abolishment of, I'm assuming, the criminal justice system in general, police and or prisons specifically. Great. Off the record, informal, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay.
That's the kind of stuff I think that allows for the sort of trust and being able to move together towards a larger goal of reducing the carceral system.
Reducing. You're talking about abolition. You're not talking about reducing. Words have meanings. Words have definitions. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I gained a bit more insight, absent a specific description of the restorative justice process in this one. Instead, this was interesting. I don't know that I'd ever heard in at least this much detail, for as much as it was, what the arguments and or demands and or requirements are on the legislative side, or the interaction with law enforcement side from the true believers. And I don't think I made it too opaque. It's nuts. Absolutely nuts. And that's my professional opinion. having no credentials at all. But then, really, I have as many credentials as apparently restorative justice practitioners and advocates would require of me to participate and organize restorative justice. Anyway, before I completely lose my voice, which I'm starting to, because I do have a stream tomorrow, Sunday, the Sunday stream, if you can believe it, at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, where I'll be doing another long-delayed, I think, Border News Digest. A lot of stuff has been happening in just the last few days regarding the U.S.-Mexico border, and I'll have some stories tomorrow morning for that. And also tomorrow, Sunday, at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, will be the fourth edition of Book Review of the Vampire, where my friend Leonora and I will be looking at another section in the book Interview with the Vampire and talking about it just because we decided to give it a shot. So there's that for tomorrow. So before I completely run out of steam, either energy-wise or voice-wise, call it here. If I've missed anybody's comments or observations on the video from chat, please leave a comment as you're able to after the fact. I do read those, and I do appreciate the feedback. Also, on the way out, if you could leave a like or a dislike, whichever you prefer, it's fine by me. And also another reminder, whether it's me or anybody else who's a content creator on YouTube or Rumble or anything else, let people know that you like their stuff and that their stuff is being posted, because YouTube and other places, they don't necessarily alert the way that you would hope they would. And so if you can share the stuff out that you like and the content creators you appreciate, I know they would appreciate it as well, especially if you can tag them in it, because when you tag me in things about my stuff, I make an effort to make sure to say thank you to you personally because I appreciate it. And with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this ambush stream. I hope you found it interesting. I found it interesting to a degree. I learned something and some things I didn't know before, and that's always the benefit of it all. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved and so kind and so contributory. Contributory? Sure, that's a word. And so generous that you have very little to do. And everybody who donated, holy cats, tonight, especially of all nights, holy cow, guys. Thank you so much, either to myself or to the fundraiser pinned to the top of the chat box. Thank you guys so much for all of your generosity. I really do appreciate it. And as I said before, I'll be paying it forward very soon, because that's how it should work in a just world, not necessarily a restorative just world, but a just world. That's how it should work. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Hope to see you tomorrow morning on Sunday. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Hope the week ahead of you treats you well. I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.